Okay, so let's discuss reasoning large language models. So the thing is, open source reasoning models were introduced recently in the DeepSeek paper and gained a lot of popularity. But the main question is, how do you prompt these models? The technique could be a bit different from the traditional GPT type models because here we have extra tokens. For instance, if I here come say, hello, and I'm using like GPT-4o mini, the output is plain text without any special tags. So if I copy this over to some text editor, you see that's the raw output. But if I switch to something like DeepSeek R1 Distill Llama 70 billion, I'm using Grok here. And if I run the same command again and do a side by side, they kind of look similar. They both have plain text. But if I actually copy the text from DeepSeek and paste that in, you see we have extra tokens. It's like HTML tags, think start, think end. And this is kind of invisible in the user interface, but it's actually embedded there. So what this reasoning model or closed source OpenAI reasoning models do is they generate this think tag. So whatever question you ask them, they will start by creating this starting think. So it says, given this prompt, hello, think. Do you need to think? In this case, it says no, closes the think, and just directly gives you the answer. But if the question becomes a bit more complicated, like tell me a joke, using the same reasoning model, in this case, it doesn't still think, it needs to think. But here I would say really, really funny joke. All right, now it's starting to think, and you see the UI is showing this as gray. It's consuming a lot of tokens and it's outputting a lot of tokens. Let me just copy this, paste it out here, and you see the whole thought process going on here. So starting to think, okay, I need to come up with a really, really funny joke. And it goes on and on and on and on until it stops thinking and gives you the actual output. All right, so that's just a simple demo of reasoning models. Now, the main question is, how do we prompt these models? I want to show first the OpenAI documentation because they have their own in-house reasoning models. In this case, O1 and O3 family of models. So O1, O3 mini are open access. We can use them through APIs. So the main difference that OpenAI says is reasoning models have been trained to think before they answer. We saw that with DeepSeek R1, same scenario, thinking before answering. And here's just some implementation. But this is the interesting part. This pretty much says the same thing about the reasoning. It says it will start by creating a reasoning token given your input prompt. It will do its reasoning, it will finish the reasoning, and then give the final answer. This is how they've been trained. Then it discusses the context window and the cost. Now, no matter what API you use, whether Deep Infra, Grok, OpenAI, the OpenAI API, which is implemented throughout, gives you the whole usage, which is the combination of completion tokens and prompt tokens. That's your input, that's your completion, you get total tokens. But it also breaks it down into more granular insights, like how many reasoning tokens were consumed and how many accepted and rejected tokens were consumed. So here, the reasoning tokens, you'll be billed for it if you use OpenAI. So even though OpenAI doesn't show you the reasoning tokens like you see with open source models, they say it's like proprietary content and they don't want it to be publicly available, but DeepSeek, since it's open source, you can actually see the thought process, which is really cool. And yes, taking costs into account, making sure you're not spending too much on a particular task. But now the main point is prompting. So I like the analogy here. It says, think of a reasoning model as like a senior coworker where you don't need to give it specific instructions about how to solve the task. Whereas a traditional GPT model would be more like a junior coworker, and you need to be really specific about exactly how you want to solve the task. And they have this cool guide here, comparison of reasoning models and GPT models. Just notice they're not using the term GPT for reasoning models anymore. And they have a section called how to prompt reasoning. And the main point here is for reasoning models, you should not do chain of thought. So avoid asking the model to think step by step. One, because it's already going to do it. So that's going to be redundant. And it says in some cases, this might even hinder performance. But let's do a test. So we have the open source DeepSeek R1, and I'm going to use a benchmark data set from their paper, the GPQA Diamond data set, which is just a series of question answering pairs that are reasonably difficult, created for experts. I go on Hugging Face, I pull the data set up, GPQA. I'm not sure if the same version because there's no official implementation of it, but I would say this is good enough. Here, I have a bunch of different questions like from chemistry, from quantum mechanics. So I'm just going to take this. I guess this is from engineering. Something similar to like material or chemical engineering. You want to calculate the angle of water on a surface. And I'll just copy the question into my reasoning model on spree.chat. So in the model, I will select DeepSeek R1, DeepSeek Distill Llama, and just paste the question out. So that's just the explanation of the question. It asks for the contact angle of a droplet of octane on a rough surface, which is reasonably difficult. Before we get the response, the actual ground truth is 124 degrees, and incorrect answer would be 129. Okay. So 124 degrees is the correct one. Let's send it out. Okay, first it's now doing the reasoning in the gray text. And if I scroll down for the final answer, it's doing a lot of thinking, to be honest. If we scroll even further down, and the reason it takes a long time is it tries to produce some response here. So like it says, theta rough is 77.7. And then it says, wait, I'm really stuck here. The way they trained DeepSeek R1 is in the training data set, when they had question answer pairs. For reasoning models, you would have question, reasoning answer pairs merged together using that thing token. And they incorporated something similar to this. So it wouldn't just explain and give you the answer. To reduce the chance of making mistakes, people who train DeepSeek, they use this wait a lot. So what it does is it basically says to the LLM, wait, evaluate what you generated so far, see if there's any mistakes, double check, think again. Now, that's why you see a lot of waits happening here. So wait, this is getting too convoluted. It seems like DeepSeek is stuck on this. I think it generated like a couple of thousand tokens so already. Yeah, now thankfully we hit the context limit window for this, but couldn't solve this problem. And that's part of it that you need to take with a grain of salt, because even though on the GPQA Diamond dataset, accuracy is 71.5, quite impressive. It's not 100%. Now let's try another question out. Let's see. Okay, so let me just take this one, the one right after. Consider the following metric. What is the area of the pseudosphere? Radius r equals 2. And if I just paste it out, get the response. Let's see if it can solve this problem. And let me look at the ground truth. It is positive infinity. That's the correct answer. Incorrect one would be 0. So we're looking at positive infinity. In this case, let's see what the response is. Okay, so it stopped again. So if I copy this out into my notebook and delete the whole thing. First, as we expect, it starts with a think tag and starts thinking through the problem. It generates around a couple of thousand tokens and it stops. So it doesn't have an end think tag. So it's kind of stopped mid-thinking. So you might say, well, it cannot solve the problem, and that's correct, because it reached the max tokens without generating a final response. Now, you might be tempted to say, come down here and say, think step by step. Lay out your reasoning in detail before giving the final response. This is the traditional chain of thought that you would do in a more complex problem like this mathematical task. But if you do this, and we don't see much of a difference here because it's already doing the thinking inside the think tag. So you see pretty much the same result. That's why OpenAI is saying with reasoning models, do not use chain of thought because chain of thought is already baked into it. It says in some cases it gives bad results. I've not tested this intensively enough to see where that could be the case. But let's see. So in the final answer, it just gives you the typical explanation. And then at the end is r equals 2 would be 16 pi, which is incorrect. It should be positive infinity. And let me also test out this same problem without the chain of thought one more time, so we can put it side by side this time. Okay, so now this one is just zero shot without any chain of thought. Okay, final answer. It arrives at the same answer as with the chain of thought, which is 16 pi, which is incorrect. Now you see there's not much difference even in the final answer because here is also giving you some step-by-step response. So existence or lack of chain of thought, it doesn't really affect reasoning models as much as it does for GPT or non-reasoning models similar to GPT as well. So that's the main thing. They also mentioned using few-shot examples. They say few-shot examples usually are not recommended for reasoning models. But if you see that zero-shot is not working and you can benefit from showing a couple of examples, that could be useful as well.